release of It this week, I decided to collaborate with one of my good friends here on YouTube, Cody Leach, to talk about two classic Stephen King adaptations. Over on his channel, we talked about The Shining, and you can go see that as soon as you're done with this video. And right now, we're about to talk about The Mist. But before we start talking about The Mist, Cody, can you tell us about yourself?
What's going on, guys? Cody Leach here. I'm sure you've seen me a few times on this channel. Masters of Movie Trivia, the one that got beat in the end. Yes, I'll come back eventually. But yeah, I have a lot of the same kind of style videos that Sean has. I do movie reviews. I do the occasional top 5 video, ranking video. I talk music and video games here and there. Do editorial videos on random subjects, or if some crazy DCEU news comes out, which is like every other day. So definitely come over and check that out. We'll have some fun. In conclusion, the movie Jason Bourne sucks.
All right, so now we're going to be talking about The Mist. And The Mist is a movie that was directed by Frank Darabont, who did The Shawshank Redemption and was the showrunner when The Walking Dead first started out, which when you see this movie, you could tell really obviously that this guy is connected to the guy that worked on The Walking Dead. But so in The Mist, essentially what happens is, you know, every family man, Thomas Jane, is at his home and a huge storm comes through. So he ends up going to the local convenience store with his son and his neighbor that he's got a rough, rocky history with. As soon as they get to the grocery store, a mist kind of engulfs the city, the whole town. Someone runs up to the door and says, there's creatures in here. And this starts the story of paranoia, horror, monsters, and you start to realize that what's outside is just as bad as what's inside the store. And this very tense, depressing movie, kind of about the human condition and how we respond to things. And overall, I had never seen it before. I watched it for the first time prepping to do this pair of reviews with Cody. And man, I knew a couple things about what were going to happen with it, and this movie still kind of hit me right in the soul. It's pretty intense movie. What's your take on this one? Your quick thoughts on it?
This is a funny movie because when it first came out, it seemed like everybody that had a voice hated this movie. All the critics didn't like it. All the horror fans, the Stephen King fans didn't like it. People who just went to go see a random movie that weekend didn't like it. And I felt like the only person on earth that actually appreciated what the movie was. And then somehow over the years, either the people who liked it start to have a louder voice, or people started to appreciate it or something. Now, whenever you talk like in the horror kind of community, this movie is really, really liked and really loved to a degree. And I've always, it's not my favorite Stephen King adaptation, but I've always thought it was a really good, really creepy study of the human condition in the situation of fear and paranoia. It's one of those movies where what the movie is on its surface is not what it is in depth, you know what I mean? It's not about monsters trying to get into this store and everybody's just trying to keep the monsters at bay. It's about people trying to keep the monsters at bay within themselves. So I've always thought it was a really cool movie. Definitely not perfect. Definitely not Frank Darabont's best by a stretch, but it is a really good movie that I'm glad is starting to get a little bit more of an appreciation now.
All right, so we're about to start talking about the movie, and when we do that, we're going to go into spoilers. So this is a spoiler review. It's much more of an analysis along with review. So if you haven't seen it, there's some big things that can be spoiled in this movie. So if you think you're going to watch this movie and you don't know what happens in the end, don't watch this review yet. Go watch the movie, then come back and watch this and talk about it with us down in the comment section. So with that kind of said, we can start talking about the good, and I'll kind of piggyback off what you were just saying there. I think the thing that was kind of struck me the best about this movie, that would just work the best, was the exploration of the different ways people responded to the scenario that they were in, and the different factions that formed, and how very quickly people started going to different groups, and it lined up with the different ways people process shocking realities. And the way people interpret other people. And I didn't know too much about what this movie was. I was like, there's people in a grocery store, and there's creatures maybe in a fog, and it's got a depressing ending. That's all I kind of really knew about it going into it. And so as soon as things started happening, and you have, you know, the neighbor character being like, no, I'm not going to go check that out. I'm not going to go out there. You're trying to trick me. You're going to make a fool out of me. You're saying crazy stuff. And we're going to be rational people and deal with this like normal, rational people. And you go, oh, like, I see where this movie's going. I see what's going on here. And just kind of as that played out, just seeing the different perspectives. And you can think about even the different ways tragedies unfold in culture and how immediately there's different factions of people interpreting it wildly differently. Some of them just having this hysterical reaction to it. Other people trying to be very rational about very irrational things. People having conspiracy theories, kind of all that. And it ties into the story. And I thought that worked really interesting, very nicely. And I wasn't expecting that when I started the movie. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It was the same thing, same reaction for me. I was expecting a run-of-the-mills monster movie. You know, I didn't really know who Frank Darabont was whenever I was young and I first saw this movie. I think it came out in like 2007 or something like that. Yep. So I wasn't the film, cinephile that I was now. I was a movie fan, but I didn't know Frank Darabont and all these different names. So I was just like, oh, it's okay. A little Stephen King monster movie. It sounds cool. And then you put it in, and just like you said, it's like within the first act of the movie, by the end of the first act, you're like, oh, this is going a completely different direction than I thought. This is going to be splitting everybody up into their own camps, if you will, about the different reactions people have to situations like this. You got people who turn to religion, sometimes a little bit too strongly. You get some people that try to just ultra analyze everything and be, this is reality and this is how reality works. You got other people who just fly off the handle and they just react to everything as it happens to them. And it's just very interesting the way that the movie kind of goes along this and kind of evokes all these different emotions through these people in this one same situation. Everybody's reacting to the same thing, but reacting in very different ways. So that's the heart of the movie to me. And honestly, that's why throughout the years when I thought this movie was hated, I never quite understood it because I felt like all the criticism toward it totally missed that point of the movie.
Yeah, right.
So to me, it's definitely the strongest positive.
Yeah. And I don't want to, we'll talk about the ending in just a moment. But even the ending of the movie ties into that point of the different ways people respond to tough situations. And so I looked up into the research, kind of the differences from the novella that Stephen King wrote and why people were angry about the changes with how kind of dark the ending goes. And I can totally understand if the ending is too off-putting to someone, but at the same time, it fits the themes. It plays entirely into what has been set up, the worldview, the exploration of how people respond to things, and it makes sense with what they've done up to that point in time.
Yeah, like the whole movie, as tension's building, like the plot is starting to boil over by the end of the movie, and the very ending, the final scene, is Frank Darabont taking that pot of boiling water and throwing it in your face. Yeah, like it's like punching you in the gut with the absolute worst way to push the theme of the movie to its extremes. Yep. And worst, not in like the worst execution, but like the worst thing you could possibly imagine. Right. So, right. Yeah, I guess it's interesting.
So let's go ahead and start talking about the ending since that's kind of where things led to. If you haven't seen the movie, we're going to spoil it, the exact ending. I had half of this spoiled going into it. So I knew going into the movie, it ends with him killing his son. What I didn't know was the movie went on for one more minute after that, and he gets out of the car, and the fog clears, and hey, we beat the monsters, we're gonna be okay. Like, I did not know that's where the movie ended, so I was ready for like dark ending. Oh, and watching the movie, being like, okay, yeah, this movie's actually building towards that conclusion to where it makes sense that what they're doing, and then they show the kids start to wake up. And you're like, oh, that was a little bit dark to have the kid wake up a little bit right before it happened, because part of the reason this scene, I was okay with this, is because the kid was still asleep, and so it's like, okay, I could see that. And then he gets out of the car, and you're like, whoa, that got so dark so fast. But that's exactly what it had been showing before, of the insanity, the cruelty, the irrationality when you're in a hopeless situation, where you're looking for an answer, you don't know what to do, and it fits what was going on. And so in this situation, kind of the final example of that is when people have no hope, they go to extremes to end things and to ease suffering, even if it's irrational. Even if like outside of the emotion of the situation, you would go, you should wait a little longer. You shouldn't just do this now. And that's exactly what people do in desperate situations.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever wrote, and I don't know if Frank Darabont wrote it, but he might have, whoever wrote that ending, like the last 5 minutes of this movie, you could tell that like they were like, okay, well, the novella kind of ends with them getting in the car, going off, and it's an ambiguous ending. Do they survive? Do they not survive? We don't know. So then they're like, let's take it a step farther. Let's get them to where they've crossed over multiple cities and the fog or the mist and the creatures have just decimated everything. Yeah, that's better. All right, well, let's take it a step further. Let's have them run out of gas. All right, let's take it a step further. Let's have him pull the gun out and then realize that he has to kill everybody. Let's take it a step further and realize that he has one bullet, not enough to kill all of them. Okay, and then let's make the kid wake up at the very last second, which is like you said, like it makes it so much worse that the kid opens his eyes like 3 seconds before he gets a bullet in his face. So then and he's like, all right, that's awesome. That is a crazy dark ending. And then someone has a light bulb. They're like, but you know how it could be darker? Let's have everybody win. And Hope was literally 30 seconds away when he shoots everybody. And you're like, oh my, like when you see that ending, like the term gut punch gets thrown around a little bit too often. This is a gut punch. Like when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, he had to kill his kid. He had to kill everybody. And now he has to go out and sacrifice himself just to stop the pain. And then when he can't even get that satisfaction of death because Hope is right around the corner and the woman who wanted somebody to help them in the first part of the movie survived with her kids. And if he would have just went with her and took her to her house, everything would have been okay. Like, it's so bad when you watch it. You're like, dang, that is a horrible way to end that story as far as like just the psyche of that guy. But also like one of the ballsiest endings you're ever going to see.
Right. So do you actually like the ending, or is it just you respect the ending? Where do you fall actually on, is it a good or a bad?
I like the ending very much. I think that there is a little bit of execution that's missed in it, which kind of, whenever we get to my negatives, I'll elaborate on it a little bit more. It feels a little bit sudden in some aspects of it, but the overall, like, the overall picture of the ending, it's not an ending that I would write necessarily. I'm not that dark of a person, as much of a horror fan as I am, but I do appreciate when a movie has enough spine to go there. It's one of the few movies that I'm like, dude, if you want to, like, when people say, what's a shocking ending? Like, that's in top 3 at least. Right.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I'd say something like that. I respect the ending. I think the ending is earned. Whereas some movies, it's like, it just gets dark in the end and they kill everybody and it doesn't fit. And here I can fully respect what, like, it fits. Like, you earned the shocking, horrific ending. At the same time, when I was watching it, I was like, to rent the movie was like $3-4. To buy it was like $7, and I was debating back and forth as to whether I should do which one I should do, because I like Thomas Jane, and I might like this kind of movie. And at the end of the movie, I was like, I ended up renting it, and I made the right choice because the ending made me go, I don't want to watch this again. I don't want to go through this emotional like, like I can only need to do it one time, and I can respect it. I can be like, Frank Darabont, you get dramatic tension. You can craft these things so nicely. I don't want you to punch me in the gut ever again, so I'm glad I only rented it.
Yeah. No, I totally hear that. And, it's funny that you say, too, that the movie actually earns it, because that's the other element, and I appreciate anybody that says that they don't like this movie, but that's the other element that people tend to criticize the most about this movie was, the mist was cool until that ending, and then I hated it. And usually when they say that, you start talking to them, and like I was saying, how they kind of miss the point of the movie. If you don't grasp that what the movie's doing about showing how people kind of respond to that situation, then the ending is going to feel like that negative side that you were talking about, where it's like, let's just kill everybody in the end, just to make everybody sick and they walk out of the theater. That's totally how it'll come across if you don't kind of grasp what the movie's going for.
And I also don't know, if I didn't go into it knowing the ending was going to be super down. If I was watching it, I was like, hey, they got away. They're driving. Oh, they ran out of gas. I wonder what are they going to do now? Are they going to leave it ambiguous? And then the guy pulls out a gun and like, oh, his kids sleep. Oh, wow, this is getting... Like, if I saw that unfold not knowing it was going to be super dark, I also would have been like, you pulled the rug out from underneath me just so you could sucker punch me. How dare you, Frank Darabont? You're the biggest jerk in filmmaking history. I could also have that response to it. I being that I knew enough, and I've known, I talked to a guy like 10 years ago, and he was talking about Lovecraftian monsters in it and the tentacles, and then talking about a real dark ending that is very cynical. And I don't think I liked the movie because the ending got too dark. So I've known that. I've had 10 years to prepare for it, and I was still like, whoa. So did you have any more positives to talk about it? Because we talked about really just kind of the themes of the political stuff and the ending, not political stuff, the different worldview stuff. And any other positives on it?
I think there's actually quite a few good performances in it. I've always liked Thomas Jane. I don't think this is the best Thomas Jane you're going to find, but I've always liked the guy. I've always felt like, he's one of those actors that has never and probably will never really break out in Hollywood where you're going to see Thomas Jane just all over posters, but I've always liked the guy. I've always thought he had good screen presence. I've always thought he was a good actor. He's always got a little bit of charm and personality to him, so I think he's a good leading man. He really comes across as the father who's just, above all else, trying to keep his son safe. And, you know, he does kind of, you see why people flock to him throughout the movie, the rational side of this grocery store as kind of like the leader. Like whenever something goes wrong, they're like, hey, come over here, look at this. Like only his opinion matters for some reason. So I think he's a good actor. I like seeing Andre Braugher. He's always been a guy that just pops up here and there. He's the neighbor. I think that a little bit of the movie that he's in, he's really good. And I also think that probably the standout performance in this movie for all the darkest reasons is Mrs. Carmody. I don't know the actress's name. I've seen her in many things, but she's basically the town religious nut. She's the one who's kind of like a cult leader in the making, and she gets to fulfill that dream throughout this movie because, you know, throughout the first, I'd say 2/3 of the movie, she's just the nut in the side of the room that won't shut up. She's talking about, this is God, hellfire raining upon us. We have earned this. And, you know, this is punishment for all of our transgressions. And you should bow down now. And everyone's like, shut up, lady. And then the last third of this movie, like after fear and paranoia and all this irrationality starts seeping into these people's hearts, they start turning to her because one of the things about when people are scared, the loudest voice in the room suddenly seems like the most rational voice in the room. And that's why you see a lot, like we talked about this the other day, that has nothing to do with this video, but like a lot of strange religious cults and weird churches and stuff like that, like the Westboro Church. Like there's always somebody that just had that loud voice, and she's the loud voice in this movie. And I think that she, you know, she's the biggest monster in the movie. I don't care about any of the Lovecraftian monsters, the tentacle monsters, the bugs, the spiders. She is the biggest evil in the story, and she totally pulls it off.
Yeah, and I guess to add on to that, or one final kind of positive on it, just in general, as a scary, tense movie about people trying to survive, it just works on that level. And I guess even you can call it like a proto Walking Dead of people responding to a horrific situation that they don't really know what's going on, people turning on each other, contained spaces. Hey, we got to go out there. Let's get some axes, run over there. What if the things pop out and get us? All of it's prototype for The Walking Dead on so many levels. I was watching, I was like, wow, I did not realize just how much this movie was going to be the test ground for what went on to be, you know, the classic TV show. But it just worked on just kind of this creepy environment with these scenarios where just enough action with horror in them, and monsters and stuff popping up. So I thought all that. Do you have any final positives?
Well, actually, something that's a positive and somewhat of a conversation that goes into my negatives a little bit.
Let's transition. Use this one and transition it into the negatives.
Perfect. So I think that the things that he goes for, I think Frank Darabont nails with his directing, and I think writing possibly. Don't fact check me.
He wrote it.
He did write it?
Yeah,
okay,
he wrote the
cool.
script.
So with his writing and his directing, I feel like the things that we're talking about that you have to grasp in order to really appreciate this movie, I think that he really goes for it. I think he really nails that. I think he gets some good performances. I think that the overall tone and kind of the claustrophobia of this movie really works. At the same time, it's always really weird to me to think that Frank Darabont directed this movie. Because when I think of Frank Darabont, I think of big, deep, dramatic, huge, epic pieces like Shawshank Redemption, like The Green Mile, and even The Majestic to a degree. I don't think of him as somebody that makes these kind of horror side of Stephen King movies. And it's an interesting stepping stone into The Walking Dead, which is, I'm glad why you brought that up, because if you don't know about The Mist, it seems weird that the guy that directed The Shawshank Redemption was the guy that started The Walking Dead. But, you watch this movie and it's like this little stepping stone. You're like, oh, okay, there is some kind of, transition there. But there's elements of this movie that I just feel like, there's things that he nails so much in The Green Mile and nails so much in The Shawshank Redemption that you watch this movie and it feels like kind of a lower scale movie, a lower ambitious movie, and it just feels a little bit odd to me that he would undertake this. Because when, Stephen King has those dramatic sides to his writing. He's got movies like Stand By Me, or stories like Stand By Me and The Shawshank Redemption and things like that you don't think of as the horror side of Stephen King. So it's always felt strange to me, even though there's things that he does really well, that Frank Darabont actually directs this movie.
Right. Yeah, especially because it's a contained environment. It's basically, you've got a prologue at the beginning where they're in their house, and then you have the epilogue at the end where they drive off. Everything else is in this contained environment, and it's, Night of the Living Dead, it's Assault on Precinct 13, people in a space trying to keep others out, with the added element of the human response to chaos and the uncertain added into it. But yeah, it feels pretty small scale and doesn't seem like the sort of thing that you'd expect from him. But at the same time, it would make sense then that the story is really about people's reactions to trauma, to tragedy, to the unknown, and that's really what the movie's about. And going back to what we talked about before with the ending of that makes a lot more sense out of all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So on the negatives, what are your negatives that immediately pop out to you?
I've never been overly impressed with some of the monster designs. I know what they're going for with the Lovecraftian stuff and having a lot of different things. Like you got the tentacle monsters, you've got the little fly monsters, you've got the bat monsters, you've got the spider monsters. When they're driving off in the epilogue, you see that huge Godzilla-sized thing. So I understand what he was going for with that. But as somebody who's seen a lot of monster movies, I've seen a lot of horror movies that go for the same type of thing, I feel like the things in the mist were never really all that threatening or scary to me. And I understand that it kind of, if he did too much of that, then it would kind of undercut what he was going for with the horror inside of the store. So on a way, I understand if it was kind of intentional, but the monster side of the movie always felt a little underwhelming to me.
Yeah, I think the most immediate way for that is they look cheap at times.
Yeah.
Like the CGI just looked bad. And whether I guess that certainly would be a budget issue, but the way they did it, the way it was filmed, it just popped out almost Sci-Fi Channel at times. Like, ooh, wow, that's considering the level of acting and some of the dramatic tension in this, that stands out as bad. And then, somewhat to your point, the way the monsters play out in the movie is like a video game.
Yeah, like you're going to a boss.
So yeah, level 1, the tentacle comes over the arm. Level 2, the flying bugs fly through the window. Level 3, the spiders attack you in the other building. Level 4, the boss fight, the big monsters and so it plays out very much so like this level is this bad guy, this level is this bad guy, which there doesn't seem like there's a story reason for that, as if the gates just open, things come out. And so why are the tentacles not attacking when the glass breaks? Why? There's a lot of that kind of felt a little bit. It's just noticeable. Like, I shouldn't be thinking about why it is every time they attack, there's a different thing. Is there a reason for that? And that's what I was thinking somewhat. Is there going to be a reason for that? And I guess actually the video game Doom is kind of like the plot of this movie. If there's a portal open to hell where creatures start coming out of it. And in the video game, there's a reason why this level is where the imps come out. And this level is when whatever the other names of things in that come out. But the movie doesn't really give a reason why they're coming out in waves like, Call of Duty Zombies or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always felt that the movie would have been a lot more effective on that side. Like, there's a scene in the movie where they get this guy who's kind of like a biker, and they tie a rope around him, and they say, go out. He wants to go get a gun, and we'll see how far you can get, and we'll know at least you got 300 feet. And you don't see anything. You don't see what attacks him. You don't see what gets him. You just hear his screams. You see the string flying all over the place, so something's grabbing him and flinging him around. You hear the crunching and the biting or whatever's going on, and then they just pull back half of his body that's been severed. And I've always felt like the movie would have been a lot more effective if all of that stuff would have been kept in the mist. If all of the biting and the crunching and the monsters and everything, you never saw what it was. It's just something. Yeah. I always felt like that would have been more effective, because that scene and scenes like it are when the tension on the outside of the grocery store is actually there. Whenever you see bugs flying against the windshield or the windows and bats flying around, that's when it gets a little bit silly to me.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, when I was watching it, I didn't know if it showed, like I'd heard my friend mention Lovecraftian, but I wasn't quite sure what he meant entirely with that. And with the way the movie starts off, I kind of thought that's where the movie was going to go. And that ambiguity was kind of what was going to drive the madness of the people was you don't see anything. And so are these people just going crazy? Are the people just running off because they're afraid? And then the movie doesn't go that way. Then gigantic bugs fly in the windows and stuff. I guess I would probably average between what the movie does and what you're saying. I wouldn't go fully all the way. Like the tentacle CGI looked bad, but if it was handled kind of more like that, like you don't know what's out there, there's just something trying to pull them out. and things like that. If it was a little bit not so much, look, bugs are in here. Hey, look, this is going on. I think that would have handled a little bit better to the fear of the unknown and not knowing what's out there. And like you could, even if like later in the movie you see just the leg of this Godzilla-sized creature, that seems more terrifying than when you see a bug fly in, because you just, I don't know what that is. All I know is there's a big, gigantic thing. And if there'd been a way to do that, or maybe when the bugs came in, the fog comes in too. And so then it's obscured. And so you can kind of see there's a thing moving around and then there's an arm missing, but you can't really tell what, perhaps I think that's where I think it might have been like the right mix, and it would have covered up the bad CGI.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was going for. Maybe not the entire movie, keep it completely ambiguous, but definitely keep it a little bit more hidden and make your imagination, play a little bit more than dumping a bunch of money into CGI that should have had a lot more money into it.
Right. Did you have any final negatives on it?
That's pretty much the most of it. I think that, for the most part, I think that there's not really any acting or anything like that or any real egregious errors throughout the movie. I think that it's paced pretty well. I think that it's got a good sizable runtime. The only last negative that I have, which kind of goes along with what I was saying with the ending, is that even though this movie does have a pretty good runtime, it feels like some things get a little bit rushed or skipped over. Like you don't really get a sense of time in the movie. It's supposedly only 2 days, but it feels like it's longer than that. Some aspects of the movie feel like whenever the religion really starts to start consuming the store, it feels like it happens really suddenly. Yeah. Versus over a little bit of time. And that would be going along. Go ahead. That
would be kind of my negative on it. My final negative. It seemed like that got overcooked a little bit too fast and too sudden, where it went from, hey, there's the crazy religious people over there, to like, we're actually going to grab a guy, stab him, and everyone on the religious side is okay with this, and then we're going to throw him outside. It felt like it went from, that's a real big jump, where it's not just that there's the crazy lady that's okay with that, but the group goes along with it and encourages it. And then, the next scene, it's like, kill the kid. That felt like so sudden, a little bit too overcooked for me with the timing of it.
Exactly. It just, to me, it felt like, it shouldn't have been so contained to 2 days, which is what they actually say at the end. It's only been 2 days, but it felt like it should have been something like maybe over a month or something like that. And actually it has timestamps maybe, or some kind of way to maybe they start growing, 5 o'clock shadows or something like that, or something to show that there's been weeks going by, and you could slowly have, there's 2 more people on Miss Carmody's side. Now there's 4 people instead of, one person basically, and then the next morning they wake up and there's 30. So that seems just aspects of the story that feel a little bit rushed, along with the ending, even though the ending is a really big gut punch, and I really admire the balls that it has. To me, it also feels like you don't quite get the sense of time. Like if you pay attention, you can tell that they're driving through multiple cities, so it's probably hours that they've been in this car, but it feels like minutes. So it feels like they leave the store, the car runs out of gas. All right, well, we're all going to kill each other. And it feels like that maybe be the one element that a lot of people kind of grasp on that ending too, where it's like, I don't know if you earned it or not. It felt like that was a little bit sudden. So there's things that I felt like the movie could have been stretched out a little bit more, at least for the way that they kind of have the sense of time.
Yeah, and I think even kind of to that point, if you just make kind of maybe these 2 changes to the movie, that you make it more obvious that a month passes. So the 5 o'clock shadows, people transferring over. And then at the end of the movie, as they're driving off, you show them kind of like in kind of the montage of the end, they stop at gas stations. You show days passing as they're just kind of, and you do something that makes it very clear. They've just driven hundreds of miles. Yes. And they're like, there's no hope. There's not going anywhere. They're going to be eaten by these creatures. So the merciful thing to do is to not let his son be eaten alive by creatures. Oh, the mist cleared. But you make it absolutely sell the audience on the amount of time. A month's gone by. He's got this big, gigantic, crazy man beard. They're desperate. They're out of resources. They're gonna die. Of course, they would make the choice that they made.
Exactly.
And those are in a sense very small tweaks to what happened. You don't even have to change the scenes or anything. You just add little elements that change the scope of time passing.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, did you have any final thoughts on it? Any positives you missed, negatives, or are you ready to give our ratings?
I think we pretty well covered it.
All right, did you want to go first, or did you want me to go to first?
Why don't you go first this time?
All right. I'm still just as confused on this one as I was on the previous one because I admired things more so than I enjoyed things once again. I think for me, I'm going to go a 7 out of 10. It's a movie that I certainly enjoyed, but it's a movie I can only enjoy one time. And it's much more, I admired it, but much in the way I admired, actually, totally differently than the way I admired The Shining, but I admired the movie. The ambition's not as high as The Shining, but at the same time, they're like when key aspects of it, like the monsters, are bad CGI. They could have been handled better. It just kind of, you start to knock it down a little bit. But certainly, I think it's a good movie. It's a movie worth seeing if you like the genre. I admire it. I don't know that I'll ever watch it again.
Yeah, and that's pretty much rings true with what I was saying. We actually have the same rating to a degree. So I would say see it on Netflix, but it's on the very high spectrum of that rating on my channel. Yeah. So I'm going to give it a solid just 3.5 out of 5, which ends up being a 7 out of 10. So
there we go.
Basically the same exact rating for pretty much the same reasons. I think that it's a really effective story if you know what the movie's going for and you grasp what it's going for. I think Frank Darabont nails the whole fear and paranoia and the negative aspects of that and people's response to those situations. I think there's a lot of good characters, a lot of different characters, a lot of great performance in those characters. I think that the monster side of it is a bit lacking. I think that the movie really doesn't have a effective sense of time. And really the most criticism I have towards it is just those small little criticisms that I have seem like they're so easily fixed that it kind of bums me out to a degree whenever I really dive into it, the fact that somebody on the level of Frank Darabont didn't think to make those small little tweaks.
Right.
But really a big fan of the movie. I'm glad that it's getting a lot more attention now, or maybe just the people who love it are being a lot more vocal about it now, but definitely recommend seeing it. Just like Sean said, if you're a fan of Stephen King, horror, monster movies, bottle movies, the fear and paranoia, seeing the human response to all that, tons of stuff to check out in this that I think you're going to enjoy. Not on the level of something like The Shining, but definitely a solid Stephen King adaptation.
All right. So how about you guys? What did you think about The Mist? Have you seen it? Also, maybe to throw in the mix a little bit, since there's now a TV show, there's the novella about it. Tell kind of your background if you've seen some of the other stuff, how they kind of compare. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it, so leave that down in the comments section. Also, be sure to head over to Cody's channel. Cody, where can we find you?
Yeah, guys, come on over. Just search Cody Leach, or you can go www.youtube.com/Cody Leach channel, and that'll take you directly to my channel. But got a lot of the same things that you enjoy over on Sean's channel: movie reviews, ranking videos, top fives, editorial videos, quite a few horror-themed videos, especially of late. So if you're a horror fan, got a lot of stuff over there. I've just finished up the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise about a month ago, and I'm currently going through the Child's Play and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise leading up to those new sequels in October. So tons of stuff to check out. Come on over and have some fun, and let me know that this video brought you over to my channel.
Like I said, be sure to head on over there. He's been a good friend of mine, does great reviews, especially if you like horror movies. His channel's the place to go. Also, if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, ranking videos, but I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you, so join me down in the comment section. Let's get a lively discussion, and thank you for watching.